How is that? Yeah, are you? Well, didn't know that I was doing
It looked like there's not a lot of it.
I want to know too. It's a shallow area at the bottom. So it looks like a line.
So here's the deal. I got to thinking last week that we're supposed to meet next week, next Thursday. And all of a sudden it dawned on me that next Thursday is the setup for the Journey to Bethlehem. And this room will be totally used. So we're going to have to cancel for next week. In fact, we won't meet back here until January 3rd, so you've got a month off. Okay?
A month?
Yeah, a month. The assignments are back there. I got to ask you, did any of you guys, the questions you did with your wives, how many of you were here last week? How many of you got the questionnaire from your wife if you're married? Did you do anything with it?
I read it and decided.
You read it and decided not to tell your wife,
No, I've got it planned, but no.
Okay, you got a whole month now, see? You got a whole month. You could just do it like you want to do it.
I thought it was a lot of questions. She's got a lot of answers, you know.
I was going to ask her, were there any arguments? Any disagreements?
Opening a can of worms.
Yeah.
Oh, this thing.
That's what you want to do. You want to open some of those areas that you really haven't talked about, that men don't have a tendency to want to talk about. So those are good to help you to grow closer together. Doesn't make any difference if you've been married a year or 30 or 40 years. Bobby and I went through it. I can't clean it. I can't have you clean toilets without me cleaning the toilet. So I went through it with her. Had some interesting conversations. It was fun.
You clean the toilet now?
I guess it was fun. Yeah. No, I still don't clean it.
It was fun for her anyway?
It was fun for her, yeah. Anyway, so it's good. It's really good. So we won't meet next week. And if we don't meet next week, and I'm hoping you guys will show up and help set up. Because it doesn't take that long to do that. And the more guys that we have, the less time that it takes. I think last year, as I recall, now I'm thinking cleanup was, we broke a record last year. I think it was an hour and a half or an hour and 35 minutes or something like that for cleanup. Setup was probably,
That was the record.
what was that? How many hours was that? Like 3.5?
It's over by 10:30.
Yeah, completely. That's
The
completely.
whole thing.
Yeah.
Usually
So-
it takes 2 days.
Yeah, so and we can break that record this year too. So anyway, show up, give us a hand, and it'll make it a lot easier. Okay?
Well, setup is from 5:30 to 10, is that?
Well, that's 5:30 to, yeah, just you don't have to stay the whole time if you can. We just like you to show up and help, and as much as you can. And the more guys that we have, some guys will show up at 5:30, some guys can't get here until 7, and that's okay. Just show up. That's the deal. So, and you got a free day next day. I could have tricked you, just got you all in here. I said, oh, since you're here, let's go to school.
That's smart.
Should have done it. Anyway. Okay, again, I'm going to make some other announcements at the end here as far as the assignment is concerned. So is everybody clear on that? We're not meeting until January 3rd, okay? This is that book that I recommended for those of you who weren't here. I'm going to email this out again. I ran across this when I was preparing for this chapter 6, and which they deal with pornography. And it looks to me like a fairly good book. It's by Lifeway. It's $14.95, so it's cheap. It's a workbook, is what it is. And the middle section, from 113 to the end of the book, which is 220 some odd pages, is sexual sin and sexual addiction. So, and that's the issue. There's a lot of good stuff to begin with, I haven't gone through everything, I'm just kind of perusing a little bit. So, but it looked like a pretty good book to me, so if you're interested in that, you just go to Lifeway, lifeway.com, and the forwards by Gary Smalling. It's a workbook, so it should be good. Now, here's the thing with all these kind of books, there needs to be accountability with it. Okay, accountability is one of the strong points to any kind of addiction, whether it's alcohol or drugs or pornography or whatever it is, eating habits, whatever it is. Accountability is really good, especially with immorality issues. And there is an accountability group already established here, okay? So if you would like to be a part of that, if you have a problem and you'd like to be a part of that group, you need to contact me so that I can contact. I'm going to try to keep this kind of closed a little bit, and the whole world doesn't need to know that you have an addiction to whatever. And but there is this group that has formed, and if you want to be a part of that group, contact me, and I'll have one of these individuals that's in the group contact you. It helps you and it helps others, okay? That's what it's all about. So that's on you. That's up to you. You need to step out, and if you're really serious about this issue, okay? We're going to deal with that more as we go along. As you notice in the assignment, and I'll go over that, it's going to deal with some more of this area of the addiction to pornography. But I'll go through that when we get to the end. Okay? Any questions up to this point before we get into the study? You all got your Bibles, I hope? Okay. I'd like someone to turn to John 13 and hold it. Someone else turn to Ephesians, the 5th chapter, and hold it. And then someone turn to 1 Peter, the 3rd chapter, and hold it. Till I get to it. Okay? Okay, so in this part of our study, we're gonna focus on how we as husbands can better love our wives. And many of you heard me make this statement, and it needs to be repeated. It needs to be repeated over and over and over again. Next to your love for Jesus Christ, immediately in order should be a deep, deep love for your wife. For those of you who are not married, that's what you need to look for. This is what this is all about. Your wife needs to be, and I've always said this, needs to be your soulmate. Needs to be your best friend. There is no better friend to you than the one that you're married to. And you know what happens is, as husbands, we get kind of off focus when it comes to our wives. We give her a card occasionally, or maybe on Valentine's we give her a card. Might bring her some flowers or some candy. Even might do that occasionally, or take her out to dinner on her birthday, or on your anniversary. You might even clean the house occasionally, or take the kids for an afternoon to give her a break. And all of that is good. It's really good. And you need to keep at that. You need to keep doing that. But many times, I don't think I'm just speaking for myself. I'm speaking for most men. Many times we have a what I call a check the box mentality. Okay, we give her a card. Okay, give her a card. Okay, take her out. Okay, what are we gonna do for our anniversary? Take her to McDonald's. Okay. Yeah, check. So we have a tendency then to revert back to what our normal selves, okay, which is, it's kind of like this. I see a lot of you guys smiling because you know exactly what I'm talking about. That's our usual role. So we think that that's taken care of, and now we can get back to my own business. I've checked that box and I'm okay now. Well, most Christian husbands feel that their biblical duty is really boiled down to one word, and that's leadership. And we've discussed that aspect of a relationship in a family. And that is part of what your responsibility is. And it's very important. But even more important than that is what the scripture says the most important word to summarize our relationship to our wives, and that word is love. Love your wife. Okay, I love my wife. No. I want you to think about that. Truly, truly love your wife, and that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. There's no question that God has designed you to be the leader in your family, but true leadership, especially in relationship to the subject that we're talking about tonight at hand, your wife, it flows from love. And love is that kind of a caring. Think about what caring means. It's tender. Think about what that means in relationship to your wife. It is affectionate. It is gentle. It nourishes. Those are some words that you just don't say them or think them. You need to define them in your relationship with your wife. And how are you doing in those areas? And begin to pick away at those areas, or continue to pick away at them. Christ talked about that kind of love and that type of role for husbands to their wives when he described, and this is a paraphrased way or an off-branch way of the servant's role in washing the disciples' feet. So, who has John 13? Somebody grab John 13 now. And I want you to turn to, turn to verse 12. Let me give you the background while we're doing this. Okay, Jesus is, they're in some room, upper room or what, some room, and they're having supper together. And so he gets up and he lays his garments aside, he grabs a towel, he pours water in a basin, and he begins to wash all the disciples' feet. Did you talk about that? Yeah, okay. I thought so. Okay, and so that's kind of the background of this. And then he says in verse 12, someone read from verse 12 through verse 17. Verse 12 through verse 17.
So when he had washed their feet, and taken his garment and reclined at the table again, and he said to them, "Do you know what I have done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, for I am so I am. If I then, the Lord and the teacher, washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I gave you an example that you should do as I did to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a slave is not greater than his master, nor is one who is sent greater than the one who sent him." 1:17 too, right?
Yeah, so.
Okay, so if you know these things, you are blessed if you do them.
Okay, what is he talking about here? That's what I'm asking.
To be a servant to each other.
Be a servant with what? What's the word?
Brothers.
Humility. Good. Very good. Be a humble servant. Now, he's talking about that attitude with everybody, right? That's what we should strive for. That's what we should grow into, right? And if we're to treat one another like that, shouldn't we be treating our wives like that? See, that's the point in this whole situation. Look at verse 15 again. It says, "For I gave you an example that you also should do as I did to you." A pattern, an example is what he's talking about. A pattern of living. So Christ's purpose in this action was to establish a model of loving and serving humility. That's what it's about. And it should really start, guys. It has to start with your wife. If you can't do it there, you can't do it anywhere. That's where it needs to start. Okay? So, in our relationship to our wives, we must have that same kind of an attitude. We must be loving and have humility in our relationship with her. In other words, be submissive to her as well. Did you get that word? Whoa, wait a minute. I thought, whoa, wait a minute. Who's got Ephesians, 5th chapter? Someone grab Ephesians 5:21 and read 5:21. I want you to know something.
Be subject to one another in the fear of Christ.
Yeah, that's it. Be subject to one another, right? You know what that word is? Subject, submissive. Be submissive to one another. It's important to see this verse in context with the verses that follow. And we're going to read those in just a moment, so stay there, Rick. And I want you to read from 22 to 33, but not quite yet. Okay? The Apostle Paul, then, submission is the first aspect. We are to be submissive to each other, husband and wife. The Apostle Paul is instructing us in our marriages here. That's what these whole verses here, all these verses are in context as we go on. How to love each other. But first he calls for mutual submission. And you and I have to be obedient so that we can have this kind of love that Paul describes to the church at Ephesus. If we submit to it and we swallow our pride, and let me tell you, I'm there. I've been there. We'll be there. Got to swallow that pride that don't want to do that. Well, if you want to have a good relationship with your wife, you need to do that. Okay? And you need to grow into that. And allow God to train us and to show us how to have that kind of a relationship with our wives. That soulmate, that friend, best friend type of relationship. So, the love that you and I show to our wives involves submission. But you're probably thinking, well, wait a minute. How is submission characterized? How does it manifest itself? It manifests itself by being meek. Oh, there's another word. Man. Meek. Men are meek. The Greek word or interpretation of meek is power under control. Power under control. That's a real man. A man that can control his emotions and his acts and his temper, his everything about himself. That is what meekness is power under control. It's tenderness with your wife. It's being a servant to her. It's being humble before her, swallowing that pride. So submission sets the tone in verse 21, and then Paul begins to instruct. And now, Rick, if you'll read verse 20, did I say 22 through 30? Through what? Look, just read 22, verse 22 through 25. That's good.
And wives, be subject to your own husband as to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ also is the head of the church. He himself being the Savior of the body. But as the church is subject to Christ, so also the wives ought to be their husbands in everything. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church, and he gave himself up for her.
Okay, good. Thanks, Rick. Okay, so the husband's role, I'm going to go to verse 25. I'm going to pick out some points here that Paul says. As we're submitting to one another, right? Then he gives us these instructions. So the husband's role is just like Christ. Headship over the church is what Christ's role is. Love your wives just as Christ loves the church. How did he express his love for the church? He died for it. He humbly died for it. Now listen, we're talking about God coming to this earth and loving you. Dying for you. God doing that for us. And that's the example that he uses. That's a high calling, guys. That's a high calling that we need to aspire to every single day in our relationship to our wives, by sacrificing for her, by dying for her. Not, I've always said it'd be easy to take a bullet for my wife. That's never even a question. I'd stand in front of a bullet easy. It's the day in, day out, day out, isn't it? That's hard. That's what's hard. It's swallowing your pride all the time. It's like left brain, right brain. How does she think that way? Well, she's thinking the same way about you. How does he think that way? So you're laying down your needs for her needs and for her desires. And we need to try, again, it's because of this left brain, right brain thing. I'm just using that as an example. I don't know if it's left brain, right brain. To try to understand and give honor to them. Okay? So, he says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her. That's what we are to do. No way to cut around that, guys. There just isn't. I struggle with it. You're going to struggle with it. And that's the battle, is struggling with it day in, day out. Because the end of it is really good. The end of it, well, it's never an end. But you grow closer and closer and closer and closer together. You think you're close now. When you put these tools into operation in your life, you're going to love your wife like Jesus Christ loves the church. And he's first. That's the order, right? You can't do this unless you love the Lord Jesus Christ with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. Or what I'm telling you doesn't make a hill of beans. It won't work. You got to love him first, and then he can love your wife through you. Okay, 1 Peter 3. Someone have that? I want you to read verse 7. We're going to really break this one down. Okay, 1 Peter 3:7. Sean's got it.
Wives in the same way be submissive to your husband, so that if any of them do not believe the word, they may be won over without words by the behavior of their wives. When they see the purity and reverence of your lives, your beauty should not come from outward adornment, such as braided hair and the wearing of gold jewelry and fine clothes. Instead, it should be that of your inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight.
Is that verse 7?
Oh, I'm sorry. Is it verse 7? I guess I was reading the whole thing. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse
7.
Husbands, in the same way, be considerate as you live with your wives, and treat them with respect as the weaker partner and as heirs with you of the gracious gift of life, so that nothing will hinder your prayers.
Okay, so let me read it in the New American Standard. That's what I teach out. You husbands, in the same way, it's the same, but there's some key words here, Greek words. Live with your wives in an understanding way, as with someone weaker, since she is a woman, and show her honor as a fellow heir of the grace of life. For what reason? In this particular case, so that your prayers will not be hindered. Really? So, be sensitive to her needs. Again, is what Peter says. Then when you understand what her needs are, you begin to accommodate those needs as best you can. And we're going to talk about some specifics of that in just a moment. Before we do that, I want us to focus in on something else. Giving honor to your wife, it says, as to the weaker vessel. You see, even though she is equal to you in Christ, and she's not inferior spiritually in any way, she is a woman, and she is physically weaker than you in most cases. There are exceptions to this rule, but in most cases, that is true. She needs you, and God has wired her for you to protect her and provide for her. She needs that strength. She needs to see that in you. She doesn't want a wimpy man. She wants a strong man. And that's what she needs to see in your character. She needs to feel, because what does that do to her? That strength that she sees in you makes her feel secure. Women are nesters. Most women are nesters. You know what I mean by that? Yeah. They've got that. They this feels good. This is my nest. Stay away. That's a woman. A man's not normally like that. Now, there's exceptions to the rule there, too. But most men are not like that. A woman is like that. They need that security. That's the way God has wired her up. And that's how the two of you can truly begin to become soulmates, one flesh. When you begin to show that strength, you begin to protect her. Here's another way you can love your wife. Be considerate to her. Peter says in that verse, live with your wives in an understanding way. So understand her. Okay, I'm gonna say this, and I know this is difficult sometimes. Understand the way she thinks. It's a tough one, isn't it? It can be very tough. But you need to break that down. You need to dissect that and begin to understand how she thinks. And begin to understand why she cries at Hallmark cards. Those kind of things. You need to understand that kind of thing. And if you have to laugh, go into the bathroom, take a leak and laugh. And then come back out. You get what I'm saying? You need to work at it. You need to use this and really work at it. So don't be don't be proud, don't be macho, don't be self-absorbed. Be absorbed in her and serve her. Be understanding, be sensitive to her and serve her by meeting her needs. Not so much your own needs, but her needs. And that means taking her feelings, her securities, her insecurities into account, her fears, her concerns, her goals, her dreams, her desires. You need to be thinking about that and accommodate that as much as you possibly can and work together in that. How do I do that? You know how you do that? Listen. Listen to her. I mean, listen to her. I know sometimes that's tough. I went through that tonight. And my wife, my lovely, sweet wife, she likes to talk. And I'm not a real talker. I mean, I am here. But I'm not a real talker. So she always wants to tell me the little idiosyncrasies of her day. And I, listen, man, I'm glad she's not here. Because I love her. And the reason I listen to her. So like, honey, you know I love you, baby. She knows this. She talks, she's real, what's the word?
Sweet, beautiful.
Well, yeah, but she's that, all that. But she's real, she likes to tear every detail apart. And I'm not a detail guy. Just give me the big picture, and I'm good with it. Yeah. I can go with the big picture. But she's not that way. So sometimes it frustrates me, but I mute the TV, and I look right at her, and I listen. And sometimes I'm thinking, okay, what does this really mean? I mean, right? Isn't that right? That's why you're laughing.
You don't try to mute her?
No. No. Okay, so that's a way that you gotta listen, guys. Put down the paper, mute the football game or whatever game you liked, or the book or the magazine or whatever, and listen to her. And if you're not attempting to do that, if you're not attempting to do all this, okay, if you ever wondered why your prayers aren't being answered, that's not the only reason, but this is one of the reasons. What's it say there? If you don't show her honor as a fellow heir of the grace of life, your prayers will be hindered. What does that mean? God's not going to answer your prayers. You're not on the right page. So that's one good reason. There's a lot of good reasons for not having your prayers answered. One of the main ones is sin. But if you're not showing her honor, which really is a sin, he's not going to hear you. He wants you to get your act in gear, especially with your wife. Okay? So here's another way, and this is another area for all practical purposes that is not in operation with most men these days, and that is really being kind and courteous and a gentleman. I can't tell you how many men I see that don't open the door for their wives, that don't do things for their wives. Again, 1 Peter 3:7, it says your wife is the weaker vessel. In other words, physically, she's weaker. There are exceptions, like I said, to this rule, but overall, that is the case, okay? So it's called being chivalrous or having chivalry. like in the old days, the white knight coming in, or what is it? The knight coming in on a white steed, there it is.
It's important to have your daughters too.
Yes, oh yeah, absolutely. This is the way to we're going to talk about that when we get to chapter 7. So, what's a gentleman, you're going to say? Oh, you know what a gentleman is? Yeah, right. Well, then act like it. That's the problem. We don't act like it. We know what one is. We just don't do it. Okay? So, what does that mean? Opening doors for her, moving the furniture for her, doing the heavy work around the house, helping in making the bed, cleaning the toilets if that's what she needs. I hate that. Especially when I've had Mexican food.
TMI.
Do the heavy work around the house, right? Okay. That acts of kindness without, here's the deal. Here's the deal. This is a big one, guys. Without being asked. Honey, if you should just do this for me, why do I have to ask you to do those things? How many of you heard that? Oh, you guys haven't heard that? You liars.
How do we know? She doesn't ask how we know what to do.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point. That is exactly the point. Hey, listen, man, for I don't know how many years I lived that way. Well, just tell me what to do. Well, honey, you should know what to do. Do you see this stuff around the house?
Then we say, stop telling me what to do.
You got to look for these things. You got to be a part of. You got to be a team player. She says, honey, the tires on my car are leaking air. Instead of saying, well, take it down to Les Schwab, they'll blow them up with it. Right? See? You take the car down to Les Schwab, and you have the tires blown up. She needs an oil change. Go change the oil in her car for her. Take it down for her. That's what we're talking about here. That being chivalrous, being a gentleman, being kind. But let me tell you, man, that goes a long way, and it works the other way, too. You know that. Now, that's not what you're doing it for, but it's a nice benefit. Isn't it? Yeah, it is. Okay, so provide an environment of protection for her. And then another thing is in verse 7 is that spiritual equalness there. Spiritual equalness. Being heirs together of the grace of life. That's what that's talking about. Okay? Men and women are equal spiritually. Probably in the church, and you're going to have to agree with me. I see this all the time. You do too. That women are more the spiritual leaders in the church. They really are. They're more adapted that way spiritually. Ought not to be that way. That's the way it is. Ought not to be that way in your relationship to your wife. You need to be the spiritual leader in your family. We've talked about that, and we need to continue to talk about that. Okay? Men should at least be equal to their wives spiritually. And that goes back to the discussions about men being the leaders in their families that we talked about. The point is that when you do take on that spiritual leadership role, and you treat your wife as a spiritual equal, you are, what does it say? Joint heirs. You are fellow heirs together. And you need to talk about those things. You need to talk about spiritual things with your wife. Where could I do that? On the way home after services on Sunday. Honey, what was the best thing you heard about Jim's message today? That can start a lot of conversations. Start taking some notes there. And be specific about, okay, I need to talk to my wife about something about this. You'll find something if you'll do that. If you'll just be disciplined to do that. And then that will prompt her to do that. Now you're talking about spiritual things, right? Studies that you've had. Like this study. And like that questionnaire. You guys got a month to do that questionnaire. Do it. Get off your derriere and do it. Mikey, just do it. Okay, so your personal devotions, what you learn. My wife is really good at that. Every morning I come up, she usually gets up about 10 or 15 minutes before I do, normally, not always. And she'll be up there reading her Bible. And as soon as I come up, she'll say, oh, I learned this out of, listen to this. And she'll read something. And we'll start talking about that. Or I'll bring up something about that. That's good. That's healthy. That's how you get that relationship together. That's how you grow together, is talking about the Lord. Okay, we're going to wind up here in just a second. In the Song of Solomon, in chapter 5, verse 16, the wife says to her husband, this is what she says. His mouth is full of sweetness. He is wholly desirable. This is my beloved, and this is my friend. O daughters of Jerusalem, this is my friend. I want to quote John MacArthur. Here's what he says about a commentary on that verse. He says this, and I quote, I love that expression. This is my friend. She rejoices in her love for him, but it is not just his romantic devotion that thrills her, which is a whole another area. We haven't even hit on being romantic. How many of you? No, don't answer that. Romantic. You need to be more romantic. To be romantic is get the candles. Get the candles out and stick them in the middle. I don't know. Everybody has their own interpretation of what romantic is. Okay? It is not his machoism or his leadership that causes her heart to sing. What is it? She is glad that he is her friend. That's the kind of relationship husbands should cultivate. It is a deep sense of intimate, equal sharing of spiritual things. It is a communion together like no other relationship on earth. And that is true, guys. Your love for Jesus Christ, next in line is that intimate, deep, deep love for your wife. That's what we're here for, right? That's what you guys come back here every Thursday for, or one of the reasons. And we want that. Then we need to work at it. It is work. It just doesn't happen. It is work. Okay? And the tools that we're sharing with you from these teachings, from the book, they're going to help you if you put them into practice. But you have to put them into practice. They just won't work. You gotta, if you're gonna kill it, I won't use that term. Lock and load. You gotta put them into practice. Take the tools and use them. Okay? Any questions, comments? Yes.
I heard one place talking about the weaker vessel thing in a different way that made it actually much more applicable to me.
Yeah.
Is they talk about it, things being weaker, not necessarily being less superior.
Yes.
Having something like a crystal glass or an old car that you restored, you don't want anybody to touch or mess with.
There you go.
You know, something you're devoted to, and you don't want it's weaker because something can happen to it, and you can't get the parts for it. You don't want anybody to mess with that. That's what we got to be talking, treating our wife. Be
Absolutely.
devoted to her and say, this is precious.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. Kind of like your Harley. I'm kidding. No,
The
that's
cover
true.
on her and then jump.
Yeah. You know, shine her out, put a cover on her, stick her in the garage. No, but you're right. That's exactly right. She is a precious jewel, and that's what we need to treat. That's the way we need to treat her. Okay. Anything else before we break here? Okay. So again, we're not meeting till the 3rd of January, right? Next week we're not meeting. We're going to all be here, and we're going to help down in the either set up or tear down. All right, on Saturday. Thursday 5:30 or Saturday. Usually it's around 8 o'clock. If you guys showed up by then, usually we're pretty well close to the time that the last group goes to. Again, the accountability group. If you have immorality issues in your life, or that you've struggled with, or that you are struggling with, there's an accountability group that's established already. Give me your name, and I will get a hold of an individual in the group, and they will call you, and you guys can hold each other accountable. That is a good thing to do, especially with these addictions, okay? A very good thing to do. I recommended Faithful and True. That's this book. The last 120 pages are really good, from what I see anyway. Again, that was something I found last summer when I was getting ready for the Teacher's Chapter. The wife assignment, you have a whole month now to do that wife assignment. Questions that you get together with your wife and talk about. Don't be laughing, PJ. I'm checking on you, bud.
I already did
Check. You did it already? I cannot tell a lie. But I will bug you until you do. Okay, because it's going to open up a good realm here, okay? And anyway, and then there's landmines of sexual sin. You're supposed to have done the first part of that. The assignment for next January the 3rd is to do the rest of it. So if you haven't done any of it, do the whole thing for January 3rd, okay? That it deals specifically with pornography, okay, and that addiction. And then there's the assignment for tonight, and there's an assignment for next January there too. Okay? Comments, questions? We're clear? We're good? Break.